When steam vanished from the main lines of Britain in 1968, a whole era came to an end as the remaining hulks were sent off to the scrapyards to await the cutter's torch. Some locomotives were sent to the scrapyard at Barry in South Wales, and there, instead of being cut up straight away, they were left intact while other work in the yard was finished. This breathing space proved to be the cornerstone of the steam revival in Britain, as preservationists formed fundraising groups to purchase and restore the engines. The yard's owner, Di Woodham, waited patiently, sometimes for years, until the locomotives were paid for in full. Seen here in 1981 are the lucky survivors of the 68th slaughter, nearly all of which have now been bought. Indeed, some of them are already running again. Barry's location meant that most of the locomotives came from the western and southern regions. That's why such a high proportion of preserved engines are either Great Western or Southern types, such as this West Country Pacific. The revival of steam has now reached a point where scarcely a weekend passes without a steam special running somewhere on British Rail. This is a train running from Carnforth to Hellerfield in 1983, hauled by privately owned ex-LMS Black 5 number 5407. For many years, mainline steam could be sampled only in the north, but a happy exception for Londoners occurred in October 1981 at Paddington Station, when Evening Star, the last steam locomotive built for British Rail, took part in a shuttle service to Old Oak Common to celebrate the centenary of the famous Great Western Depot. Bringing up the rear, Castle Class number 5051, a magnificent example of a rescue from Barry Scrapyard, restored by the Great Western Society of Didcot. The Sunday morning specials attracted hundreds of visitors of all ages, enjoying the brief return of steam to the Great Western's London terminus. All the latest rolling stock was on display, but steam was still the main attraction, especially Evening Star, which has a special place in railway history. The last locomotive built at the Swindon works of the former Great Western Railway in 1960. It was also the last one built for British Rail. It has a special status in the National Collection. It's normally on show at York Museum. Passengers returning to Paddington were hauled by number 5051, Grisling Castle, bringing some real Great Western character back to the main line. Despite the huge success of steam's return to Paddington, the station was really far too busy to accommodate steam operation. The 1981 trips actually ran from the parcels platform instead of the main station. So the steam lobby within British Rail looked elsewhere in London and settled on Marylebone. Arriving at the former Great Central Terminus in January 1984 was the ex-LNER A4 Pacific, Sir Nigel Gresley. The survival of a turntable at one of London's quieter terminals was a significant factor in choosing Marylebone. The loco had been hired by the post office to launch a new issue of stamps with a railway theme, designed by the famous artist Terence Cuneo. Gamely, and not without some difficulty, posed for the assembled photographers. For the locomotive, this was its second time facing the press at Marylebone. It had been named there in 1938, after its celebrated designer, Sir Nigel Gresley. The excitement over, the A4 majestically disappeared into the winter fog, perfectly recreating the atmosphere of a London terminus in steam days. Steam in London had come to stay, and the old milk dock at Marylebone became a part-time steam shed. Weekend specials ran to Stratford-on-Avon, with steam haulage as the main attraction. These trips have now become a regular feature, often booked up weeks in advance. The splendid sight of steam leaving a London terminus can now be enjoyed almost every Sunday, usually with a famous named express locomotive. Equally nostalgic is the once familiar sight of a steam express thundering past the suburban rooftops as it accelerates out of the city. Sir Nigel Gresley is seen here at Kilburn, where the Great Central shared tracks with the Metropolitan Railway, before heading out into the country past the fields of Devon. Banbury is the main water stop on the route, and the A4 draws the crowds as she steams out towards Stratford. Crowds gathered on this Yorkshire hillside are waiting to see the most famous A4 Pacific of them all, Mallard, the world's fastest steam locomotive, which was returned to steam in 1986 on the York to Scarborough line, seen here at Kirkham Abbey. Another popular locomotive with the enthusiasts is the ex-Southern Railway Pacific City of Wells, owned now by Richard Greenwood and normally kept on the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway. The well-known Settle to Carlisle Railway, with its steep gradients, has become the favourite stamping ground for City of Wells. City of Wells' home, the Worth Valley line, is a perfectly preserved Yorkshire branch line, where the ex-LMS Ivat 262 tank sets the scene as it steams past the cotton mills. Still in Yorkshire, the market town of Pickering, in the old North Riding, is now the terminus of the North York Moors Railway, which in 1986 played host to Evening Star on a visit from the National Railway Museum at York. We can now share the spacious cab of the 9F with its well laid out controls as the North York Moors crew set off for a demonstration run. Steam preservation is just as active in the south, and one of the best-known lines is the Bluebell Railway in Sussex. Horsted Keynes used to be the junction for Haywards Heath, but now plays the role of terminus as a Southern Railway Maunsell 260 brings in a train of period coaches. Another major preserved line in the south is the Kent and East Sussex Railway at Tenterden. On loan from the Birmingham Railway Museum, an unusual visitor, a great Western pannier tank, 7752, getting a rare chance to show its paces on line work. Pannier was a little too enthusiastic in its efforts to climb Tenterden Bank and set light to the surrounding fields. After this, the engine was fitted with a spark arrestor for the rest of its visit. A most interesting event staged in 1986 at Tenterden was the running of military trains, reflecting the line's involvement in wartime traffic in the Second World War. This is an ex-Southern Railway USA tank, one of a batch sent over from America for Army traffic and allocated to the Southern Railway. military vehicle enthusiasts joined forces with the Kent and East Sussex to provide a unique replica of an army train of the 40s. Meanwhile, another military train was being marshalled at Rolvenden as a Brighton Terrier passed with a passenger train. This time the locomotive was a British Austerity 060 tank, ex-War Department, and perfectly restored in camouflage livery for the occasion. The scene epitomizes the sleepy country branch lines which suddenly sprang to life during the war as emergency diversions took place. The Austerity tank locomotive design was so successful it was still being built after the war, both for army and civilian use. This example was built for the army by Hunslet in Leeds in the early 50s. Many railway coaches were converted to ambulance use in the war, and this perfectly restored Southern Railway example is typical of the period. The Austerity also took its turn on passenger trains for the steaming home day at Tenterden, seen here pulling into the terminus. Finally, a view of two military engines together as the Austerity loco at Tenterden waits to pick up its train while the USA tank pulls in alongside. All praise to the Kent and East Sussex for an original and imaginative event. From branch lines to miniature lines. The Romney Hythe and Dymchurch Railway in Kent has been a firm favourite with holidaymakers for years. A main line in miniature, with elegant Pacific locomotives looking like scaled-down Flying Scotsmans. The locomotives were designed by Henry Greenley in the 20s and have never lost their popularity. When the Liverpool Garden Festival was staged in 1984, its success was guaranteed by the provision of a 15-inch gauge miniature railway. The Romney Hythe and Dymchurch helped out with expertise and locomotives, in this case Black Prince. The Liverpool line was very well built, with all facilities properly installed, including signalling, level crossings, bridges, stations, and of course a water column. Black Prince is unusual, built in Germany in 1937 by Krupp for the Düsseldorf Railway Exhibition and bought by the Romney Hythe in 1976. Its original name was Feusichlichen. Its two stablemates, Rosenkavalier and Murgatroyd, are also in Britain at Bressingham in Norfolk. The Germans were greatly taken with Henry Greenlee's miniature designs, and as early as 1920, the Krauss Company built this engine for the Prater amusement park in Vienna. The little train threads its way through the Vienna woods on a trip so popular with the Viennese townsfolk that an intensive diesel haul service is operated all year round, with just one of the two steam locomotives brought out on summer weekends for old time's sake. Apart from the full-height cab added in later years, the loco is unchanged after nearly 70 years' use. Meanwhile, back at Liverpool, Black Prince is underway. The spacious locomotive shed at Liverpool also housed some locomotives from the Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway. Main attraction was River Urt, which began life in 1894 as Muriel, an 080 tank built by Sir Arthur Hayward for his pioneer 15-inch gauge line at Duffield Bank, Derbyshire. Muriel was rebuilt at Ravenglass as an 082 in 1927 and has worked there ever since. The loco was preparing to take over a train hauled by a Ravenglass diesel, and this sequence shows how professionally the railway was built and operated. must have been a source of great disappointment to operators and public alike that it was not deemed possible to retain this highly attractive feature to brighten up Merseyside in future years. At the end of the line's allotted 5-month season, the locomotives were returned to their owners and all the track taken up and sold, leaving just these pictures as a souvenir of this stylish and regrettably short-lived miniature railway. its brief existence, the Liverpool Garden Railway did enjoy one singular honour. It ran a royal train on the occasion of the opening of the festival by the Queen. Proudly bearing the royal train head code was Samson from the Romney Hythe and Dymchurch Railway. From the fairy tale world of royal trains in miniature, we now come back to earth and look at one of the last steam industrial railways in Britain, at the Royal Navy dockyard in Chatham, just before it closed in July 1983. The dockyard covered a vast area of several square miles of warehouses, docks and services, as befitted a past age when Britannia ruled the waves. A fleet of small steam locomotives bustled about a complex network of lines that ran around every dock and, as we've seen, into every warehouse. Ajax is an 040 saddle tank built in 1941 by Robert Stevenson and Hawthorne in Newcastle, and is one of several named after famous warships of the Royal Navy. The smaller dockside cranes were all distributed by rail around the yards, and Ajax here recalls busier times when thousands of tons of stores were on the move, with naval vessels sailing to all parts of the world. Here, in the last days before closure, the cranes were being marshalled to be cut up for scrap. But fortunately, the locomotive has now been preserved. These powerful little machines were capable of handling large tonnage at low speed. Ajax showed off her strength as she cleared the sidings of a long rake of decaying wooden rolling stock. Full-time crossing keepers with red flags were on the Navy payroll right up to the end, having successfully evaded earlier defense cuts. The ritual of unbraked wooden wagons being shunted by steam was once an everyday sight. But by 1983, this was the last place it could be witnessed, complete with that nostalgic clatter of buffers and couplings that used to adorn the soundtrack of half the old films in the cinema. The ships of the Royal Navy had all gone as Ajax cleared the dockside tracks of any remaining wagons. The line from the eastern dock to the main stores was nearly a mile long and had the atmosphere of a country branch line. Parts of the dockyard were banned to road traffic, and Ajax took full advantage with one of the last stores trains on the rundown Chatham system before complete closure. Back to the main line now, and the most popular engine of all with the fans, the Duchess of Hamilton, making a run past at Appleby. Kim Mallion and other members of the National Railway Museum team maintain this powerful Pacific of the old LMS in tip-top condition, and the locomotive has rewarded their efforts by achieving the fastest times over the Settle to Carlisle line by any steam locomotive in recent years. Handsome Pacific, a glimpse of vintage rolling stock and spectacular scenery proved a winning combination. The special passes desolate Blee Moor signal box at the top of the Cumbrian Fells before passing Garsdale Head en route to Carlisle. But the most scenic line of all on the British rail network is the road to Skye, from Fort William to Mallaig in the Western Highlands of Scotland. The beauty of the area attracts many visitors, but not normally in sufficient numbers by rail, and the Mallaig line was threatened with closure after it lost the fish traffic. But the reintroduction of the steam locomotive has changed all that. In May 1984, ex-LMS Black 5, number 5407, received a rousing send-off on its inaugural trip from Fort William, witnessed by young and old alike. Ben Nevis looms in the background as the Black 5 hurries past Bannerby. The best-known landmark on the line is Glenfinnan Viaduct, the first railway viaduct in the country to be built of concrete in the 1890s. At the little wayside station of Arisaig, a huge crowd gathered to see the first steam train on the line for 21 years. The younger generation who'd never seen a steam locomotive were totally enthralled, and those who remembered the old days raised a cheer. The locomotive crew, Colin Ross and Alex Howie, took to the Black 5 as though they'd never left it. They cheerfully accepted the noise and hard work, happy to sacrifice the comfort of a diesel cab. They had good reason. Steam specials are now a daily feature of the Mallaig line in the season, and closure plans have been shelved indefinitely. The fight for jobs has certainly been won here. To say that the steam had a good reception at Mallaig would be an understatement. Except for those out on the trawlers, the entire population of this remote fishing village turned out to welcome their new source of prosperity. Steam had come to the Highlands to stay, and after the excitement was over, Paddy Smith's Black 5 took a final bow before going off to the sheds to prepare for its busiest schedule since being withdrawn from British Rail in 1968. Finally, a glimpse of another success story, the return to steam on the Great Central Railway, of British Rail's last and largest express passenger design, the Duke of Gloucester.